Gennady Yevstafiev, retired Lieutenant General of the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service.
American army is not participating in supply lines, for example, through Pakistan to Afghanistan. The protection of supply lines is done by private military companies. What is this? This is a sort of institution which hires very qualified, very often retired people from American armed forces and the CIA, and is keeping them as participators in the American aggressions all through the world. But they are not uniformed. They are paid in a different way. So when it comes to casualties of American army, for example, in Afghanistan, it is about 4,000 people through these 10 years. But the private paramilitary companies are not counted into these losses. Whereas during these 10 years, American private paramilitary companies have lost almost 1,000 people. So it's not counted into the overall number of the American army losses. And the CIA, in its turn, is doing the same thing. For example, you remember Abu Ghraib in Iraq. Abu Ghraib, the prison of Abu Ghraib, was kept by private paramilitary forces, and that's why there were tremendous excesses in violation of human rights. Not only military of the American army violated, but mostly the paramilitary private companies were violating the rights of the prisoners, and they have inflicted so many insults on the national religion and character. So this development is taking growing role in American military expeditions. The administrations are in position to minimize the military losses. The various American institutions are using them for rather dirty work. You remember that there was a lot of discussion about the American secret prisons in Europe, including the Eastern Europe, and in other parts of the world, especially in the Asian and Arab countries. This was kept by paramilitary forces, and the representatives of CIA only brought it there, and they have left them there under the guard of private paramilitary representatives. And when we come to outsourcing, we find that this allows Americans to hire local people for money, of course, for very dirty work inside their own country. The natives are working for the Americans in this sense, and they are considered to be part of the whole exercise. I think it is a dangerous thing, and it really removes the barrier between the violation of American army of human rights of prisoners and the PWOs and so on, and simple and irresponsible. They are not committed to anybody except for their companies, these people who work for American paramilitary forces and institutions. And mind you, the American army has a manual of war operations, and this manual of war operations prescribes what kind of behavior the American army should follow against the enemy, against the POWs, and what is allowed and what is not, and they are keeping in this manual the main elements of Geneva Convention. Whereas these private military, paramilitary institutions, they are not bound by this kind of things. And this allows the American administrations and certain representatives to use them to carry unprecedentedly dirty work with all kinds of violation of human rights. And somehow it has not yet become a certain problem which is being discussed. But the time will come and the Americans would be forced to allow to explain what kind of thing it is private paramilitary forces, by which laws they operate, and who is responsible for them in the long run. Let's wait for this time when the international community will touch upon this very sensitive issue.
Mr. Evstafiev, but is there any international regulation perhaps looking into the issue now? If we talk about, for example, the presence of the United States, say, in Iraq or in Afghanistan, and the United States are pledging to reduce their presence there by certain numbers, etc., etc., do I get it right that those private military contractors are not taken into account?
No, you see, the outsourcing goes further. It brings these private paramilitary institutions into the American foreign policy because it has been announced that some private paramilitary institutions are going to participate in training of Afghan army and Iraqi detachments. And this allows Mr. Obama to claim that he is moving out American military people. Of course, he is moving because he pledged to do this. But nobody speaks about the fact that instead of this army, on a private contracts and agreements with the local governments, they introduce the private paramilitary institutions for defending the perimeter of very sensitive buildings, installations, and so on. So, and on the surface, it appears there are only 10,000 of Americans in Kabul, for example. But if we look into the matter, we'll see there are thousands of people who are connected to the idea of making, as they recently announced, of making Afghanistan as their strategic ally. I think it is a dangerous thing, and it really removes the barrier between the violation of American army of human rights of prisoners and PWOs and so on, and simple and irresponsible. They are not committed to anybody except for their companies. These people who work for American paramilitary institutions. And mind you, the American Army has a manual of war operations, and this manual of war operations prescribes what kind of behavior the American Army should follow against the enemy, against the POWs, and what is allowed and what is not, and they are keeping in this manual the main elements of Geneva Convention. Whereas these private military, paramilitary institutions, they are not bound by this kind of things. And this allows the American administrations and certain representatives to use them to carry unprecedentedly dirty work with all kinds of violation of human rights.
Sir, thank you so much. And just to remind you, our guest speaker was Gennady Evstafiev, retired Lieutenant General of the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service.